Breaking news, it's been reported that De'Anthony Melton is out for the foreseeable future after being diagnosed with a sprained ACL. I saw him limping late in the second quarter, and I thought he had sprained his ankle because he was moving really gingerly, and it just looked like he shouldn't have even been out there. And I was like, oh, they need to take him out of the game. I was really surprised that Steve kept him in the game because his movements were clearly limited. So I was pretty surprised to see him back in the second half of the game, starting in the third quarter. But if you remember, he actually got taken out relatively early, maybe after the first 3 to 4 minutes of the third quarter. Podz had replaced him in the starting lineup. Now, as we all know, Melton finished that game, played in crunch time, and played really well. So this news really came out of left field. But I do think that if it was a really significant injury, he obviously would not have finished that game. The fact that he played and that he played really well, first of all, it shows a level of toughness about him that I really like. At the same time, this is really unfortunate because as I've been talking about over the past week or so, I really wanted to see Melton in the starting lineup. We finally have gotten a chance to see it for the last 2 games. And well, the first one was okay. It was against OKC and it was okay. It wasn't terrible. That unit obviously needs a little time to gel. I think Melton being in that lineup really helps everybody across the board, defensively, offensively, and especially for Trace as well. But now this comes up and we're going to have to kind of put that in the back burner once again. I suspect that it's going to be a grade 1. The team still hasn't figured out or announced the severity of the injury, but I would guess that it's nothing more than a grade 1. And he'll miss maybe, I don't know, maybe a couple of weeks. We pray and hope for the best. But in the meantime, the Warriors now have to go back to square one, trying to figure out who their starting shooting guard is going to be. And man, I feel like at this point, we've been talking about this ad nauseum, but it has to be addressed again. Is it going to be Moody? Is it going to be Lindy? Is it going to be Moody and Hield? And in the last video that I discussed this, I actually mentioned Podz. And honestly, I'm kind of over the idea of starting Moody. I think Steve Kerr likes Moody and Hield off the bench. And that leaves either Lindy, and obviously some people are bringing up Kuminga as well, but I think Steve has already established that he wants to bring Kuminga off the bench. So that leaves Lindy or Podz. And again, Podz is somebody that I brought up in the previous video, and Podz has not had a very good second year. He's had, I guess, what you could call a sophomore slump. A lot of people have been discouraged and even upset about his ineffectiveness, the way it kind of looks like he's scared. He's been shooting really awful from the 3-point line to start the season off. And yet I feel like a lot of his struggles could potentially be remedied if he's in the starting lineup. Now, to say that he's in the starting lineup doesn't necessarily mean that I want him closing games or anything along those lines. But at the same time, Podz has shown a history of just playing better when he's in the starting lineup. And I feel like a lot of people have forgotten the fact that earlier in the season, when Steph Curry missed time with a sprained ankle, you guys do remember who started at point guard, right? It was Podziemski. Now, he wasn't the most efficient, but basically in those 3 games, he put up 15 points, 5 rebounds, 6 assists, a block, a steal, something along those lines. Those are starter numbers. And not necessarily that I'm looking for starters numbers. I just feel that, and I've mentioned this in the previous video, when it comes to who should be in that starting lineup, based on how the Warriors tend to come out in the first quarter and what kind of offense they like to run. They often like to run the motion offense to start things off. Steph Curry comes out relatively easy going, not going ham from the get-go. So if they want that starting unit to play motion and to be able to thrive in it, I feel like Podz is the most suitable. He's a secondary ball handler. He pushes the pace. And I don't think that he's a great primary playmaker, but as a secondary playmaker, decision maker, finisher, I think he's much more capable. There's also the fact that when you look at the 2-man rating for the Warriors, the one with one of the highest net ratings next to Steph Curry in particular is actually Podz. The one who has the highest net rating is Kyle Anderson. The second one is Podz. You have to put this into consideration and think about how much easier the presence of Steph Curry makes the game for everybody else on the team when they're playing with him. And again, Podz is going to, for the most part, I think, remain in the rotation. I don't think Steve is ready to completely take him out of the rotation. And that means the Warriors need Podz to play better. And if they want him to play better and to try to remedy this struggle out of the gates, well, what better way to try to do that than have Podz playing next to Steph Curry? Podz is really not a pure point guard. To me, he's always been a combo guard. And so he can play next to Steph Curry and be able to coexist well with him. And he's a hustler, good secondary defender, takes a ton of charges, just very active. And if you notice in the last game, he finally got that mask off him. So maybe his three-point shooting will come back to where it should be. It should average out. The guy is shooting something like 20% from the three-point line right now. That's unrealistic. Podz is too good of a shooter to continue to shoot this horribly. At somewhere down the line, it's gonna come around. And hopefully it'll be sooner than later. And if he's starting, maybe that'll get him going. Because something that I've noticed about Podz is that he tends to play a little bit better when he's starting than when he's coming off the bench. I think we saw that a little bit last season as well. He had an opportunity to start some games and he played very well in those games. But once that opportunity was taken away from him and he started to come off the bench, he was a little less consistent. I know the inclination of a lot of people is that Podz should not be getting such opportunities, but I really don't care. What I care about is the best possible combinations that fit the best for the Warriors to be able to succeed. This is not about favoritism. This is not about people's personal narratives. If you think about it, I mean, I had advocated for Lindy earlier in the season. I'm not necessarily opposed to trying Lindy in the starting lineup, but at the same time, I think from a secondary defender standpoint, I've seen a little bit more of his defense from an individual standpoint, and I haven't loved what I've seen from him. But either way, given the options right now, for me personally, the best fits appear to me like Podz should be number one. And this is, of course, only because Melton is not available, but it would be something like Podz, Lindy, and then Moody. And again, I'm not really even considering Buddy Hield to be a starter. Although it wouldn't really surprise me if they actually tried that route. And maybe there's a path for the Warriors to focus more on the offensive end to begin the game in the first quarter. But for me personally, I just don't want to see the Warriors prioritize their offense when it comes to figuring out their rotations and especially starting lineup more than defense. And I think Podz has more capability from a defensive standpoint than Buddy Hield does. Anyway, this is a hot issue right now. A lot of people have a lot of different opinions about what to do with that starting shooting guard spot. And it's a very sensitive thing because we don't want to see the Warriors come out to poor starts. And it's very unfortunate because against the Mavericks, that starting lineup basically won all their minutes from the first quarter and the third quarter. And obviously they have a game coming up on Friday against the Grizzlies, and that team is on the come up. They have a lot of talent. They're a very deep team, and it's not a team that the Warriors should underestimate by any stretch of the imagination. You know, the Warriors only played twice this week, and this is their final game of the week. They only played one other game, that being the Mavericks game. So they don't want to squander this opportunity to win this game before going into next week. There is some good news as well. Kyle Anderson is probable to play against this team. And I continue to emphasize the importance of Kyle as the only viable power forward that is coming off their bench, has the capability of connecting the Warriors defense from an all-around standpoint, has the potential to be able to close games if necessary. And I'm very curious to see what the coaching staff decides in terms of who's going to be starting in that two-guard spot. Leave down in the comments below who you feel like is the most viable option at the shooting guard spot. I know a lot of people will feel doubtful about Podz, but again, this is a non-permanent move and it is not a closing lineup. It's just a strategic one so that the Warriors come out better. And well, you want everybody in the rotation to play well, and this is a path potentially for Podz to wake up and regain some confidence that he seems to have lost. Much more content coming very soon. I am in the midst of working on a Steph Curry film breakdown, so you can look forward to that. I am hoping to get that out and done by tomorrow-ish, let's say. That's all I got for now. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time.